Good afternoon, and welcome to this media conference hosted by the Roundtable of Civil Society Organizations on the issue of the abuse and manipulation of the nation's parliament by the government for its narrow electoral agenda. We want to especially welcome our live audience on the various radio and television frequencies, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, to this media conference. My name is David Abdullah, and I'm the convener of the Roundtable, and I'll be making a statement on behalf of the Roundtable, and then I'll be followed by Mr. Ramesh Lawrence Marad, Senior Counsel, who is here in his capacity as a member of Democracy Watch, which has been invited recently and has agreed to join the Roundtable as an important civil society organization. He will be followed by Mr. Faris Al-Rawi, who, as we know, is a member of the Senate and the Public Relations Officer of the People's National Movement, the PNM, of course, being another member of the Roundtable. And the final speaker in our media conference this afternoon will be Dr. Keith Rowley, who is the political leader of the PNM and also the leader of the opposition. Following our statements, we will be open to the members of the media for questions up until the end of our 1-hour live media conference. This is a statement of the Roundtable. The Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago is the legislative arm of the state. Under the Constitution, it is empowered to, quote, make laws for the peace, order, and good government of Trinidad and Tobago, end quote. In addition, the Parliament is empowered by the Constitution to, quote, inquire into and report in respect of government ministries, municipal corporations, statutory authorities, state enterprises, and service commissions, except the Judicial and Legal Services Commission, end of quote. Furthermore, the Parliament has standing committees that engage in discussions on important policy matters related to key areas of national life, such as foreign policy, energy, national security, among others. The Parliament consists of the President, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. The Parliament both makes laws for the good government of Trinidad and Tobago and is supposed to make the executive, that is the cabinet or government, accountable for its actions and decisions. The nation's Parliament is therefore one of the institutions of state that is a cornerstone of our democracy. The government, for its part, is responsible for bringing to the Parliament proposed legislation in the form of bills for debate, amendment, and passage. Once passed by both the Senate and the House of Representatives, a bill is sent to the President for his assent. According to the Constitution, at Section 62(1), quote, when a bill is presented to the President for assent, he shall signify that he assents or that he withholds assent, end of quote. The Parliament, therefore, needs to be respected by the government. Unfortunately, since the majority of members of the Parliament are themselves part of the government, either as ministers or junior ministers, on many occasions, the government believes that it can do as it pleases and therefore treats the Parliament with disrespect. On such occasions, the government uses its majority to manage the procedures of the Parliament in a way that suits its political agenda. Thus, for weeks, there will be a few sittings of the Parliament, or sittings would be brief to facilitate ministers and other government members to attend political rallies, meetings, or even toy distributions. In the Senate, the government does not have an automatic majority, as the number of opposition and independent senators is equal to the number of government senators, with the Senate President, who is a government senator, having a casting vote. The government is therefore more constrained in how it manages the business of the Senate. This notwithstanding, the UNC government has consistently in the past 5 years used its majority position to run the Parliament in a haphazard and vai-ki-vai manner. For example, the UNC has frustrated the completion of debate on private motions by adjourning the Senate sittings at an early hour when those motions were being debated, while scheduling marathon sittings to pass bills which it deems important. Having practiced such disrespect, the UNC government went much further and engaged in the most blatant abuse of its majority in the motion for the suspension of the leader of the opposition, which suspension this roundtable addressed in great detail, given that it was an attack on the Parliament and the Constitution, and therefore on all citizens, quite apart from a violation of the rights of the leader of the opposition and the law of natural justice. For the UNC, the business of passing laws for the peace, order, and good government of Trinidad and Tobago was secondary to its party political agenda. This represents a serious abuse of and disrespect for the Parliament. A government has 5 years within which to pass legislation which it thinks will improve the country and the lives of citizens. A serious and responsible government ought to plan its business in such a way that it can bring to the Parliament in good time the most important bills for debate. A government that respects the Parliament ought to allow all members of Parliament, and especially the members of the opposition in the House and Senate, and the independent senators, enough time to study the legislation so that informed and careful consideration is given to what will become laws that are to be enforced. This is what making good law is about. It is to be noted that government members would have seen the bill in its draft form long before it gets to Parliament, since legislation first goes to the Cabinet and its several subcommittees. Furthermore, a government that gives credence to the democratic process must provide adequate and reasonable time and the opportunity for citizens to examine, comment, and propose changes to bills. The Constitution mandates this in the preamble, which states, quote, "The people of Trinidad and Tobago have asserted their belief in a democratic society in which all persons may, to the extent of their capacity, play some part in the institutions of national life and thus develop and maintain due respect for lawfully constituted authority." End of quote. When citizens have no knowledge of what legislation is proposed by the government, and thus their views and interests are deliberately excluded from the process of making law, they cannot be expected to have any respect for lawfully constituted authority. This is a state towards which we are rapidly heading, given the government's total disregard for the views of citizens and its abuse of the Parliament in the last days of this, the 10th Parliament. According to the Constitution, the life of a parliamentary term is no more than 5 years from its first sitting. The first sitting of the 10th Parliament was on June 18, 2010, and therefore this Parliament will stand dissolved by midnight on June 17, 2015. The UNC government's insistence on having both the Senate and the House sit for several days a week for long hours at a time in the dying days of the 10th Parliament is a totally unacceptable manipulation of the business of the Parliament and amounts to gross abuse, which may well be unconstitutional. Among the bills that the Parliament was called upon to debate and pass were the Finance, Variation of Appropriation, Financial Year 2015 Bill 2015, the State Land, Regularization of Tenure, Miscellaneous Amendments Bill 2015, the Industrial Relations Amendment Bill 2015, the Gambling, Gaming and Betting Control Bill 2015, the Waste Recycling Bill 2015. In addition, one of either the House or Senate has to consider the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Bill 2014 and the Insurance Bill 2015. Each and every one of these bills has far-reaching consequences for the peace, order, and good government of Trinidad and Tobago. Each and every bill, therefore, ought to have been proceeded with on the basis of proper democratic processes within the Parliament itself and between the government, stakeholders, and citizens. The UNC violated the tenets of democracy in each and every instance. Thus, the finance bill was presented in the last days of the Parliament, it being debated by the Senate at its very last sitting, which went until the early hours of this morning, even though the government would have been aware of its requirements for expenditure months ago. The State Land Bill was laid in the House on May 29th, passed by the House on June 3rd, with the expectation that it would have been passed by the Senate by June 10th. There was absolutely no process of public consultation, no prior policy statement on this by the government, and senators were given little or no time to consider this bill, which would have opened the door for land grabbing by friends, family, and financiers of the government. As one editorial put it, the bill was crafted to serve greed, not need. The Industrial Relations Bill was laid in the House without any prior consultation on its specific provisions with major stakeholders, including labor, employers, and business. This resulted in the unprecedented situation of all these essential stakeholders demanding the withdrawal of the bill, albeit for different policy reasons. The Gambling Control Bill was laid in the Senate the day before it was debated, thus giving senators absolutely no time to consider this complex piece of legislation properly, and which would have legislated excessive criminalization for even the ordinary casino workers. The bill did not reflect major proposals and put forward by stakeholders. The Waste Recycling Bill was in the government's manifesto in 2010 and could have been laid in Parliament long ago. Yet it was laid in the House on the 20th of May and debated and passed on the very same day. It was then laid in the Senate on the 25th of May. The Motor Vehicle Bill was passed by the House, but was so badly drafted that the Senate was asked to consider more than 130 amendments in its 286 clauses. In spite of spending more than 50 hours of debate and in committee stage, the Senate could not complete work on this bill, so badly was it drafted. The House is yet to consider the Insurance Bill, which was amended by the Senate. The UNC therefore wants the House to consider these amendments on the very last day of its life, which means that if the House disagrees with any of the Senate amendments, it cannot be effected, as the Senate will not be able to meet again to approve the House amendments. This is not conducive to making good law. What then is the reason for the UNC's manipulation and abuse of the Parliament? It is simple. They are using the Parliament to win votes. The UNC is not about having the Parliament make law for peace, order, and good government. They are about winning the election, and the Prime Minister herself has mandated this, as per her comment, what's wrong with winning an election? For the UNC, the end is always winning and holding on to power by any means, even when this involves the abuse of Parliament. The Roundtable says, everything is wrong with abusing the Parliament to win an election, for the result would be bad laws, laws that will result in the absence of peace, will create disorder and chaos, and bad government will reign, and the citizens will be the losers. The Roundtable congratulates the independent senators who refused to engage in the passing of bills without having the time to give proper consideration to them. The Roundtable, however, sees a Machiavellian strategy at work by the UNC, knowing full well that the robust independent senators would not tolerate the abuse of the Parliament and that there was simply not enough time to debate and pass all the bills before the life of the Parliament came to an end. The UNC wants to woo voters in the impending general election by saying, vote UNC, and we promise to amend the IRA. We promise to pass the squatter regularization bill so that everyone will get land. We promise to pass the gambling and betting bill so that all casino workers will be secured. We promise to pass the recycling bill to protect the environment. So they want to now turn it on its head by their own failure to get the bills before the parliament in time. They want to turn things on its head. Indeed, in their warped strategy, they may well state that those who oppose the abuse of the parliament are also opposed to helping workers and the landless and the environmentalists. So those who seek to do right will be cast as villains, while the abusers will be seen as popular heroes. At the same time, the finance bill is to pay back pay to public servants and teachers and to employ more CPEP workers. This is another way of using the parliament to craft an electoral strategy to win votes. Today, we repudiate that and stand on the principle that the parliament must not be manipulated and abused. Our final point is that the House has on its order paper for tomorrow the Constitution Amendment Bill 2014, popularly known as the Runoff Bill. And the leader of government business has repeatedly stated that the House will debate and pass the bill before the Parliament is dissolved. This bill was criticized by many sections of the national community when introduced in August 2014, when the Parliament, according to its standing orders, should have been on recess. It was rushed through both the House and the Senate, with members having to endure the abuse of long hours. Yet the UNC, for all its haste at that time, allowed 8 months to elapse before being considered by the House, given that the Senate amended it in September 2014. It is to remember that public outcry against the bill was due to the absence of any prior consultation or policy discussion on the runoff provision. Good governance requires that constitutional amendments and fundamental changes to the system of electing members of parliament, and therefore the government, be the subject of proper public consultation. That did not happen in August 2014. The UNC has now compounded that violation of the democratic process by failing to put in place a process of public scrutiny of the bill subsequent to it being debated by the Senate and prior to it being brought back to the House. Worse yet, and completely unacceptable to the Roundtable, is that the UNC had planned to pass the bill in the House on its last day of sitting, as stated repeatedly and categorically by Leader of Government Business in the House, Dr. Munilal, and parroted by Minister of Legal Affairs and Justice, Prakash Ramadar. We wish to state that this bill can be construed as giving the UNC government an electoral advantage. This would be illegal and unconstitutional, and there has recently been a judgment in the Privy Council which, in determining a decision of the St. Kitts and Nevis Parliament, held that the Parliament could not be used to pass measures that would provide an electoral advantage to the government. Just minutes ago, the Prime Minister made a very uncharacteristic announcement at the post-cabinet briefing, stating that the runoff bill would not be passed by the House tomorrow. The Roundtable is of the very strong view that this announcement was due solely to our decision to hold this press conference today, which decision was announced yesterday. The Prime Minister knew that we were going to demand the withdrawal of the runoff bill today, and in the face of the loud public outcry, legal action, and the massive mobilization that would have taken place, the bill was withdrawn, or rather the Prime Minister announced that it would not be passed tomorrow. This, for us, is a Roundtable, a victory for the Roundtable. This is a victory for the Roundtable. This is a victory for the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. In particular all those citizens who raised their voices against the runoff, who stood in vigil day and night when the bill was being debated in the House and Senate last year. This, therefore, is a victory for all those who took a stand and refused the bullying tactics of the Prime Minister and her government, which attempted to change the electoral system by which we choose and elect our MPs and our government. This is a total victory for the people. The defeat of the government's attempt to abuse the parliament for electioneering and other purposes is a victory for the people. Finally, we call on all citizens to remain vigilant, for the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And this is absolutely necessary at this time when the parliament will be dissolved on midnight of June 17th and before the election has been held, which means that there will be no parliament to hold the executive or the government to account. And therefore, we, the citizens, must be vigilant to ensure that this runaway UNC government does not do anything in the intervening period between the dissolution of Parliament and election date. Thank you very much.